Johnny Riall, the British Triathlon Paralympic head coach, team manager, guru and all things sport. First off, we have to say you look far too young to have achieved what's the equivalent of a Lifetime Achievement Award, courtesy of 220 magazine this week. Just tell us a little bit about that, because it must be quite a proud moment for you.
Yeah, I did make a joke, and at 32 to get a Lifetime Achievement Award, I thought I might as well hang up the boots now. But it was such a fantastic honour, really. I've been involved in triathlon since I was 12. I started working for British Triathlon not more than 6 weeks after I finished university, and it's just a sport that's really close to my heart, and it's something that I've dedicated pretty much every week to since then. I've been involved in the Paralympic programme since 2009. It was about a year old at that point in time, and it fills me with pride. Yeah, the amount of things that I've seen and been able to be a part of, and the development of what I think is just such an amazing sport. For it to be recognised by somebody else is a fantastic honour. We certainly don't have any plans to slow down yet. Yeah, and hopefully we can carry on doing some pretty cool things.
Yeah, and of course you're part of that whole journey from really, I suppose, that the formalisation almost of the sport into its categories, right through to getting onto the programme of the Paralympic Games. When you were there in Rio, how did it match up to your expectations of what you thought or maybe hoped that the event as a whole would be like?
The event was stunning. There was a lot of controversy, I guess. There was a lot of risk around the Paralympic Games, and would it happen and would it not, and what would the crowds be like. And I think Rio delivered an absolutely superb Games. It was certainly the best single paratriathlon there's ever been in terms of its organisation, of course, the quality and the crowds. But I think what was as important was the history behind it. I wasn't certainly the only person or team manager or coach who has travelled this journey. We've got really good links with people from the USA team and from the Italy team, and there's a number of us who've been around right from the start. So to culminate that and to almost mark it with our first outing at a Paralympic Games, it was nice to kind of share that journey with a few people who really kind of got where it had come from. And I think it's healthy to not necessarily lose that history and not lose the context of what that game's meant to a lot of people. And obviously the performances were outstanding as well, which certainly added a real kind of touch of quality to an event that I think really should hopefully last the test of time within the Paralympic movement.
Yeah. And obviously there was so much build up towards that first Paralympic Games everyone's talking about, but we've got Paratri coming up in a major event, well, less than 12 months now. Absolutely. Because it's going to be included partially at least on the programme for the Commonwealth Games. Yep. So just tell us a little bit about that and what impacts that's had on your role.
Yeah, absolutely. So within the Commonwealth Games, they don't always run full programmes of events. Australia chose to include both of our wheelchair categories, so they're called our PTHC categories now. And I think it's a massive step forward for the sport. So in Rio there was only the men wheelchair category represented, and in Gold Coast next year we're going to have both the men and the women. What we've seen since Rio is an absolute influx of female wheelchair athletes come and talk to us about what the sport is and what opportunities they could have. We've seen a number of athletes already kind of start that journey. We had the British Triathlon Champs a couple of weeks ago, and we had a number of truly world-class wheelchair athletes come and do their first multi-sport event, ultimately to try and kind of take their first step on the ladder to qualify and hopefully compete for their home nation next year at the Commonwealth Games. I can't wait. I think it'll be, like I said, a real good stepping stone, and hopefully one that we can kind of take forward to the next Games in Tokyo.
And finally, Johnny, it's not always been highs over the last few years. One of the difficult scenarios you had to deal with was finding out that only 3 of the 5 categories were going to be included on the Rio Games. How did you deal with that, and what's the chances that we'll actually be able to expand the Paratri programme when we get to Tokyo in, I was going to say 4 years' time, but we're already a year on, so 3 years from now?
Yeah, it was an incredibly difficult time. I think we knew that period was going to come. We knew from quite an early stage that we weren't going to get a whole programme of events. And as disappointing as it was, we always prepared to kind of deal with that situation as quickly as we could, because we knew time wasn't on our side to then prepare the athletes who were going to go. But yeah, ultimately it did mean that within a day, overnight, we lost half of the athletes on our programme. Not every athlete stopped doing triathlon. Some unfortunately did through that circumstance. We we dealt with it the best way we knew how, and thankfully we've got a number of athletes who kind of went through that process and weren't able to go to Rio, who are still competing and who are back kind of on our program now, hopefully pushing forward to Tokyo. I think all we could do with a sport, and all we could control as a team really, is to try and make our performance standards as high as possible, to try and make the event as credible as it could be, to really show that we were a sport that could stand alongside other established Paralympic sports, as a sport that should be there, that deserves to be there for the future, and that deserves to have a full programme. We now have 6 men categories and 6 female categories, so ultimately our sport is a sport of 12 different categories, and we know that the ITU are incredibly positive in terms of their hopes and expectations to build the number of categories for Tokyo. That decision is partially out of our hands. It will be the IPC who make that decision, and where we are at with that is the IPC would have to take some medals off some other sports to distribute them to any sports who want to increase their programme. I think the sport in Rio went down incredibly well. Like I said earlier, it was an incredibly well organised, and the standard across all of the categories was so high that that's all we can control. We'll keep going out to try to push those standards on to deliver a truly world-class, sport, in the hope that we can take a whole team next time and not leave anybody behind.
Yeah, well, thank you on behalf of the rest of the British Triathlon, the fans like myself, for the work that you've done and the success of your team, and good luck leading up to the Commonwealth Games, and I'm sure we'll be speaking to you between now and Tokyo in 2020.
Yeah, thanks for your support.